The movie opens up with a flashback to the time when our protagonist Victor was a little boy. On one fateful day, he and his family get into an accident as their car falls off a bridge. Although Victor manages to survive, his father doesn't make it. In the present, a teenage Victor has nightmares about the accident and has developed a paralyzing fear of heights. One morning, he refuses to go to school because the students are being taken on an excursion to the nearby mountains. There, they plan to watch the solar eclipse, but Victor is afraid his phobia will kick in when they reach the top. However, his mom makes him change his mind by promising that his father will always be there to protect him. Meanwhile, 1,000 years in the past, a shaman casts a spell that will help him find a powerful artifact named the Stone of Power. He plans to use it to rule the whole world. The fire in front of him forms the shape of a dragon head, which matches the image on Victor's jacket in the present day. In the meantime, Victor has fun on the excursion with his best friend, Vovchik. He's also brought a bunch of fireworks to light at the end of the day. On the other hand, Vovchik has brought a megaphone to fool around with. After walking through the forest for a while, the group reaches a bridge. However, Victor freezes in the middle of it because of his phobia. This forces Vovchik to drag him back to the start of the bridge while the entire class laughs at him. Embarrassed, Victor runs into the forest and hides from everyone else near a cliff. Soon afterwards, Vovchik finds his friend and tries to console him. However, their chat is interrupted as the solar eclipse begins. Suddenly, a massive earthquake hits the area. Vovchik falls off the edge of the cliff and holds on to the rocks just in time. Victor wants to help him, but his phobia of heights keeps him frozen. And before he can muster the courage to do anything, a magical portal opens behind him and absorbs Victor along with Vovchik's megaphone. When Victor opens his eyes again, he finds himself on the same cliff, but 1,000 years in the past. Nearby, there's a man in armor named Oleshko being attacked by a group of enemy soldiers called Cumans. Oleshko, being a crafty swordsman, defeats these soldiers easily. But things get complicated when he's attacked by their leader, Andek, who quickly overpowers him and brings more soldiers as backup. At that moment, Victor trips while trying to get a better look at the fight and accidentally activates the megaphone. This distracts the soldiers and gives Oleshko a chance to escape. Luckily, he has a horse and picks up Victor before the Cuman soldiers can get their hands on him. After a while, Victor and Oleshko reach a river, where the latter summons the water spirit to form a path for them to pass. This path disappears once they've crossed, forcing Andak and the Cumans to give up on the chase for the time being. Following this, Oleshko takes Victor to his village, which is protected by a stronghold. Victor's garments and way of talking are viewed as strange by the residents, and they fear he might be a spy. Hence, they throw him in prison until they decide what to do. Meanwhile, Andak goes to see the shaman to discuss the failure of their mission, but the shaman surprisingly reacts happily when he hears about the boy in weird clothes. He believes that Victor is the person that will guide them to the Stone of Power. Sometime later, Victor is visited by Olenka, a young local girl who brings him milk and makes sure he's doing fine. Soon afterwards, Oleshko comes to pick him up and takes him to the river for a test. The water spirit will decide if he's a spy or if he's trustworthy. Once they reach the river, he is thrown into the water with his hands tied. But the river spirit considers him worthy and throws him out without hurting him. Victor is then accepted as one of the villagers and gets to meet the leaders properly. Among the leaders are the wise elder, Ovisi, and the fighters, Oleshko, Ilya, and Dobrinya. Suddenly, their names make Victor realize these are mighty knights that are described in ancient poems. He then claims that he's from 1,000 years in the future. At first, they don't believe him, but when he uses his microphone, they are taken aback. Victor then asks for a way to return to his own time, and Ovsi promises to look into it. Later in the evening, Oleshko comes with some news after talking to the river spirit. There is a way for Victor to return to the future, but for that, he will have to search for a mage who can teach him how to open the time portal by force. Fortunately, Oleshko knows where to find a mage. As the days pass, Victor spends his time in the village learning to use the sword and the bow. He also gets to see the stronghold's watchtower, which is so tall that it can help them keep an eye on the whole kingdom. Later, he also meets Tuharin, a dim-witted Cuman prisoner who is kept inside a cage near the watchtower. After the training sessions are over, Victor leaves the village. He's on the lookout for the mage using a map that Oleshko had shown him. Fortunately, he comes across Olenka while she's gathering mushrooms and convinces her to be his guide as she knows the area well. Without noticing the shaman's spy raven that's following them, the teens walk for a few hours until they enter a passage between two huge rock walls. Victor suddenly finds himself in a desolate land, which is an illusion cast by a mage who lives nearby. He can hear strange voices in his mind. The voices say that if he wants knowledge, he must confess his greatest fear without lying. Without hesitation, Victor shares the story of the car crash and his fear of heights. The mage approves of the boy for having accepted his weakness and shares the information he's looking for. He reveals that an artifact called the Stone of Power can help him open the portal to the future. However, when Victor asks where the stone can be found, the mage replies in a riddle. He says it can be found where the wingless make their nests and will be seen when Victor rides the wind. Only someone able to touch another heart with his own can reach the Stone of Power. As soon as the mage finishes saying the riddle, Victor returns to the forest with Olenka. When he shares the riddle, she guesses that the nest for the wingless must refer to a nearby village named Stork Village. A few hours later, the duo makes it to the village. Victor makes a kite on the spot and uses it to ride the wind, just like the riddle said. Soon afterwards, the kite automatically falls into a small pond nearby. He then jumps into the water, follows the string attached to the kite, and finally finds the Stone of Power. Unbeknownst to Victor, the shaman's spy raven sees all of this and flies to tell his master. As soon as the news reaches the shaman, he sends a bunch of Cuman soldiers to steal the stone. Just like he had hoped for, these ruthless warriors not only kidnap Victor and Olenka, but also light the Stork village on fire. Fortunately, thanks to the watchtower, the soldiers at the stronghold learn about the attack and immediately send their warriors, led by Ilya, Dobrynia, and Oleshko. They beat up the Cumans easily with their superior sword skills. When everybody gets back to the fortress after the victory, Ilya vows to direct Victor so he can find the portal that he came from. But Ovsi suggests they need to wait for a storm because the god that made the stone was the Master of Thunder. He believes that only a storm can activate its power. Later, Victor follows Ovsi to his home and discovers the old man is trying to make a flying machine. The boy from the future takes the opportunity to teach him about aerodynamics using a paper plane as an example. From then on, Victor and Ovsi work together on making functional wings. In the next scene, Ovsi suggests that the best spot to hide the Stone of Power is on top of the watchtower. But when Victor refuses to go up there with him, he reminds the young boy that confronting one's fears is important. Soon afterwards, Victor and Ovsi manage to make it to the top, where the ladder hides the stone under a pile of rocks. Unfortunately, the shaman sees all of this in his magical fire. A few hours later, a heavy hailstorm arrives. The big hailstones strike the captured Tuharin in his cage, causing him great pain. Fortunately, Victor grabs some old sailcloth and covers the cage with it to protect the prisoner. That night, a flash of lightning hits the pile of rocks on top of the watchtower. The Stone of Power, along with other rocks, falls near the cage. Tuharin cunningly uses the debris to break the lock and escape. He takes several things from the village, including the Stone of Power, along with other pieces of rocks, before fleeing. He then travels to the Cuman camp, where the shaman notices Tuharin has accidentally brought the Stone of Power. So he informs Andek that they'll now need the person who retrieved the stone to make it work. The next morning, people in the stronghold find out that Tuharin and the stone are gone. Despite this, Victor and Ovsi concentrate on finishing the flying machine because it's their only hope to recover the stone without a war. Sometime later, Ovsi and Olenka go out to gather berries and some moss. There, they're ambushed by a group of humans that kidnap Olenka. Ovsi attempts to safeguard himself, but ends up getting injured. He somehow manages to make it to the village and tells everyone about what happened. But soon after, he succumbs to his injuries. On the other hand, Olenka is taken to Andek. He snatches a paper bird that Victor had given her and sends it to the stronghold with a raven. When Victor receives it, he decides to risk his life and set off to the human camp alone. There, he's asked to activate the stone if he wants Olenka to live. But Victor cleverly pulls out the fireworks from his bag, lights them, and throws them at the soldiers to create chaos. Unfortunately, before he and Olenka can escape, they're captured by Andek, who gives them a final chance to activate the stone. Victor doesn't know what to do until he recites the riddle in his head and realizes the heart-to-heart part means the magic of the human bond. He approaches Olenka, and when they hold the stone together, the magic inside it finally comes to life. At this moment, Shaman snatches the stone away and Andek orders Tuhirene to kill the teenagers. However, Tuhirene can't bring himself to do it because he remembers how kind Victor had been to him. Instead, he frees the two prisoners and gets them a horse. The following morning, Victor and Olenka return to the stronghold and caution everybody about the approaching human assault. The next day, along with the human army, comes a giant golem, a massive beast made out of rocks that the shaman controls with the power of the stone. The beast takes a huge boulder and throws it at the stronghold gate, destroying it completely. Sensing the imminent danger, Oleshko leaves the stronghold and makes the golem chase him. He expertly dodges every slow attack until he makes the beast trip and fall into the river, where the water spirit captures it. At that moment, a new eclipse begins and Andek orders his army to attack the stronghold. However, the villagers bravely defend their home under the leadership of the three knights. When Andek realizes that he's about to lose, he decides to abandon the battle. But the shaman manages to bring the golem out of the water for another attack. Seeing this, Victor plans to climb to the top of the watchtower and use the flying machine to get to the shaman. Ovsi's words of support ring in his mind and help him overcome his fear, allowing Victor to climb on the flying machine and jump off the wall. The machine flies just as smoothly as he had hoped for. He soon lands on the cliff where the shaman is standing. Victor then pushes him off to his death and finally recovers the Stone of Power. Unfortunately, Andek arrives at the cliff as well, intending to steal the stone. The two struggle for a while, and Victor eventually throws it into the water to safeguard it. With the power of the stone now gone, the golem immediately disintegrates into ashes. Enraged that his plans have been foiled, Andek proceeds to launch his attack on Victor. But before he can do so, Oleshko arrives at the scene. The two men then engage in a fierce battle, and in the end, Andek falls to his death the same way the shaman did. In the aftermath, Oleshko takes Victor to the forest where the magical portal is present. And as soon as Victor enters the portal, he is transported back to the present where Vovchik is still hanging on the edge of the cliff. Now that he isn't scared of heights anymore, he bravely manages to save his friend. This earns Victor an ovation from the rest of the class, who are watching from the other side of the cliff. The movie then cuts to a year later, where Victor finds a heart-shaped stone in a nearby forest. He touches the stone, feeling Olenka's presence on the other side.